Well, hello everyone. Thanks so much for joining us this evening. My name is Diane and I am with the programming department at Kent District Library. One of the best things about my job is that I get to help produce these great streaming programs and share wonderful, relevant information with our community. We are very pleased and honored to host this evening the Legal Aid of West Michigan. They're an awesome organization that works on our behalf. And I'd like to introduce you to Steve Grum. Steve is going to actually lead our program tonight. And hi, Steve, how are you?
Hey, Diane, I'm doing great, thanks.
So, Steve, what are we going to be talking about tonight?
Alrighty, well, first, let me say that one of the best things about our job is getting to work with you and KDL, so we're delighted to be here. Tonight, what we're going to do is talk about the upcoming expiration of the eviction and foreclosure moratoriums that have been active through the CDC for the past several months. So we'll do two things here. First, we're going to focus on the eviction moratorium, and this is going to be a lot of information for renters who might be worried about evictions forthcoming at the end of the month or sometime soon after that. We'll give you a sense of what's actually going on and what kinds of resources might be available for you to get some help. That's number one. Number two, kind of the same thing on the foreclosure front. So this is for homeowners who might be a little bit worried about keeping current with payments and a worst case scenario of foreclosure. So both of those moratoriums, eviction and foreclosure on federally related loans, are going to expire on July 31st. That's not this Saturday, but the next one. And that's why it was important for us to get out with some information and, even more importantly, some resources and some things you can do to help yourselves between now and then also into early August. If you have any questions during the program, you can write them into the comments box on the platform you're using to watch this live stream. Remember, if you do that, to keep the questions general and don't put in any specific information about yourself because they could be visible publicly. Also, too, we're recording the program, and so we'll make sure the recording is available as soon as we can, probably in the next couple of days or so, early next week maybe, on both KDL's and our social media pages. Okay, so if we can move things along, the one thing I want to do before I introduce my co-panelists and presenters is give you my necessary lawyer disclaimer language. I'm a lawyer, so I got to do it. So just so everyone knows, what we're doing tonight is offering information and resources. We can't offer legal advice. We can only offer you legal advice in one-on-one private conversations. But we think that what we provide tonight is going to be informative and super valuable, both for renters and for homeowners. Okay, that said, end of disclaimer. I'm going to introduce now my colleagues, Karen and Jana. Karen Chapkus is our Director of Litigation at Legal Aid of Western Michigan. Karen's handled over the years all kinds of housing cases, both eviction related and foreclosure related. So we're delighted to have Karen here. Hey Karen, how's it going?
Good, how are you?
Good, thanks. And with us also is Jana Willis. Jana is one of our Legal Aid COVID Fellows. Jana has been all eviction diversion all the time over the past several months, in and out of court and helping tenants to stay in their homes and to stay current on rent. So Jana, good to see you. Glad to have you here.
Thank you. Good to see you too.
And now that I'm picking on you, why don't we actually start with you? And as we move things along, we'll pick right up with renters and go into that.
Sure. So today I'm going to talk about eviction prevention measures that were put in place for renters during the pandemic. There's two main protections. The first is the COVID Emergency Rental Assistance, which is abbreviated to CERA, pronounced SARA. This is an assistance program that provides help for back rent, utilities, and future rent. The other protection that was put in place, and the main reason we're here today, is the Centers for Disease Control Eviction Moratorium, or the CDC moratorium. This prevents evictions for non-payment of rent reasons until July 31st, 2021. You may qualify for one or both of the programs, and it depends on your circumstances. So if you're not sure if you qualify, please feel free to reach out to Legal Aid. Our website is www.lawestmi.org. With the CDC moratorium expiring on July 31st, though, we're here to hopefully provide you with a little more of an overview of the eviction process and help you identify your situation, where you're at, and what to do next. So the first thing to know about evictions, this is a little bit of an overview, but the first thing to know is that it's illegal for a landlord to forcibly remove you from your home without following this process. The eviction process, it's very detailed, but as for the purposes of today's presentation, this is a simplified version of how it usually works. The first step is your landlord gives you a formal written notice. This can be called a notice to quit or a demand for possession. The purpose of this notice is to inform you that the eviction process has started. On that notice, there'll be a date that you can pay overdue rent and late fees by. If you pay those fees, then everything's satisfied. But if you don't make that payment, the landlord can then bring this matter into court. Which that starts the legal proceedings. The landlord has to then file their complaint with the court and legally serve that to you. Attached to the complaint will be a summons, and that'll give you the date and time of your hearing, and that'll be the first time you need to appear in court. The court proceedings are 2 hearings. You'll have your initial hearing, and then the next hearing is the trial. And then after all of that, the court may enter a judgment against you. So under normal circumstances, when a judgment's entered against you for non-payment of rent, the landlord may petition the court for a writ or an order of eviction. That's just a fancy way of saying the paper that the sheriff or any other official uses to physically remove you from your home. So during the pandemic, the CDC has set up an eviction moratorium, and that's what's created a process for you to be able to remain in your home. So in order to get that CDC moratorium protection, you first have to go and get a form off of the CDC website. It's called a declaration, and you fill out the CDC declaration, you print it off the website, fill it out, sign it, and give it to your landlord. When you have a valid CDC declaration in place, the landlord can still go to court, but it prevents them from being able to get the writ of order, or that piece of paper that allows the sheriff to physically remove you from your home until the moratorium expires, which is currently set for July 31st. So with a valid CDC declaration in place, the court can still hold proceedings. You may still go through the eviction process, but at the end, when you get a judgment, you won't be removed from your home while you're protected by the CDC moratorium. So it's important to know that this process only prevents the eviction while the moratorium is in place. You're still going to be responsible for rent, fees, penalties, anything that's accumulating under your lease agreement. So to help tenants stay current on your rent during this eviction program, there is additional help. That program I mentioned at the beginning, the SARA funds, it's the COVID Emergency Rental Assistance Program, and we'll get to that in a minute. That's a really important resource to help you get on top of your rent moving forward. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of an overview, a brief summary of the eviction process. And now that you might understand the current picture, let's talk about what's going to happen now that the moratorium is expiring, what to expect, and what options might be available to help you out in the future. So if you're in a situation where no eviction process has started, but you find that you're falling behind on rent, you can still apply for the SARA program. There's no requirement to be in court or in the eviction process to get these resources. So I encourage you to apply for SARA assistance. The SARA funds are managed by your county, and in each county there's a housing assessment and resources agency. They're called HARAs, where you can apply. You can start with the MSHDA SARA website to see how you can apply. That link is right there, or you can reach out to your local HARA. If an eviction has already started or a judgment has been entered to you, if you've been a part of that eviction process, you still have time to apply for SARA fundings. When the CDC moratorium expires, some things to expect is that there may be a hearing or a waiting period, but different courts are going to be doing different things. So while others may allow for eviction right after the CDC moratorium expires with no additional notice, some judges might just be entering in a writ of eviction. So if you're protected from an eviction right now because of the moratorium that's in place, you should be prepared for either there being another hearing or the possibility that a judge might just issue an eviction order without a hearing, and have a plan, know what to expect if you're going to have to be evicted from your home. However, before we move on, do know that if your reason for eviction is non-payment of rent, full payment to the landlord of the rent, plus any late fees or court costs that were awarded in the judgment, may be able to stop the writ of eviction being entered. So this is why applying for the SARA funding is so important right now. As of now, you may still be able to qualify for these funds, have these resources available for you, and prevent the eviction after the CDC moratorium expires. So just remember, though, that partial payment's not going to stop the eviction. It has to be payment in full. So on this next slide, I'd like to share with you the contact information for these resources we've discussed, and in the worst case scenario, get you thinking about how to find help if you should have to lose your home. We've talked about the SARA program. This is their website, or you can visit your local HARA to apply. It's also important to know, though, that right now HARAs are backlogged in their applications. So they have been given authority, though, to process applications with court cases faster, and they have higher priority over applicants that don't have court cases. So if you have a court case, you need to communicate that to your HARA while you're completing your application. Give them your next hearing dates. Let them know that you are only there because of the moratorium. And if you're expected to be evicted due to the moratorium and you have a pending SARA application, now is a really good time to contact them and let them know what's going on so that they give your application some priority. Another tip about the SARA program is that recently they've reassessed the guidelines and have determined that future rental assistance has now been extended from 3 months to 6 months. So even if you were awarded SARA funds in the past, you're not precluded from reapplying, and I encourage you to go and apply for additional future assistance. Also new to the program is that there may be assistance for securing future housing. So even if you need to move, if you have application fees or other fees that might assist you in being secure in a home, communicate that to your HARA for further assistance in those matters. Now, during all this process, it can get complicated, especially if you're in the court system. There's legal help available to you, though. The MichiganLegalHelp.org is a great self-help tool. They can go into much more detail than I can today about all of these different things we've talked about. They provide timelines and other things that you can reference. And that's just a great self-help tool to get into more details. Please reach out to legal aid. We're here to help you, and we want to help you through this process. That's what we've actually been given more funding to be able to help persons who are facing an eviction. So contact legal aid no matter where you are in the process of an eviction. We're here to help possibly negotiate, even dismiss some cases at court. It really depends on your circumstances, so I encourage you to apply. The State of Bar of Michigan also provides referral resources. And then on this next slide, there's some emergency resources in the worst case scenario if you should lose your home. A great resource to call is 211. This is a hotline that can connect you with available resources, including Kent County's homelessness system, their shelters. They can also get you in touch with the Kent County Housing Assessment Program. But if you'd like to contact them directly, here's their phone number. They will get you in touch with the SARA application as well. So those are both great resources. And then I just encourage you to consider and think about, if I am evicted, what is my plan? Where am I going to go? You have a little bit more time to think about this. So start packing, think about what you might need, medications. If you call 211, they can give you some ideas, resources, and packing lists. And finally, I just want you to know that you're not alone in this. We're in a housing crisis, and many in our community are facing an eviction. And I encourage you, don't hesitate to reach out for mental health support, legal aid support. financial support through Sarah. There is help for you. So please reach out to these resources, call 211, and they can connect you with any of them.
All righty. Thank you very much, Jana. I think that's a really important closing note. If you leave with nothing else and you're worried about evictions and the moratorium expiring, know that there's help out there. There's financial help, there's legal help, and there's help for you to take care of yourself. Why don't we pivot now and we'll move on to home ownership. And I'm going to bring in Karen to run us through that and to talk a little bit about the foreclosure moratorium, and similarly with to what Jana just did, some of the resources that are available to you. Take it away, Karen.
Great. Thank you so much, Steve, and thank you, KDL, for having us here tonight. So homeownership and foreclosure works on a really different track than eviction. And so I'm here to talk about those differences and how the foreclosure moratorium has worked during the pandemic. First of all, it applies to what we call the federally related mortgages. So these are mortgages with Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, the VA or Veterans Administration, FHA, sometimes those are called the HUD mortgages, or rural development, sometimes called the USDA mortgages. Between these groups of mortgage, that covers about 70% of residential mortgages in our area. So it really is a substantial number of the mortgages that you or your neighbors likely have. Right now, for all of these federally related mortgages, the moratorium is scheduled to end on July 31st. They each have sort of their own notices and own letters, but they're all lining up with the same end date at this point. So during the last, 16 months or so of the pandemic, these federally related mortgages cannot move forward with any steps of the foreclosure process. But once the moratorium lifts, they can look at where they are, where the homeowner is, are they behind on payments, where they are in a process called loss mitigation, and can they then move forward to initiate or resume the mortgage foreclosure process. Now, kind of complicating this and what they can do when is that a federal agency called the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, or the CFPB, has put in place rules that take effect on August 31st that require mortgage companies to take certain steps before they can move forward with foreclosure. This might mean that August might be a weird month as we have a lot of the foreclosure moratoriums expiring at the end of July, but we don't yet have the CFPB rule in effect. So we'll have to sort of see what mortgage companies do in August. But at the end of August, this rule does go into effect that kind of deals with some very COVID-specific protections. The rule that's going to take effect does involve that the mortgage companies have to reach out to homeowners to give them information about options, that the mortgage companies have to work with homeowners to assess different options that may be available, and then potentially offer solutions such as loan modifications or other what are called loss mitigation options. With all of this going on, it is incredibly important that homeowners who are behind on their mortgage respond to contact from the mortgage company. I know it's tough to answer the phone and not quite know who's on the other side. I know we all get lots of junk calls, but if you think it may be your mortgage company, it really is best to take that phone call and talk to the mortgage company about where you are with things. And to begin the process of working with your mortgage company so that you can get options assessed and figure out what you might be able to do moving forward. If the mortgage company does not hear from you, if you don't pick up the phone, if you don't do anything in response to the reach outs, they can move to foreclose faster. So it's really important that you respond to those communications. Now, speaking of mortgage companies, it can sometimes be really confusing to understand who's doing what and who you should be talking to and whether your mortgage might even be one of these federally related mortgages I'm talking about. So just a little thing about the terminology here is most often folks know who their mortgage servicer is. And the reason you know who your mortgage servicer is because that's where you send your payments. And that's who's going to call you on the phone, and that's who you're going to get your letters from. And so that's probably, it might be a bank, so locally we have a lot of Fifth Thirds, sometimes a chemical bank, that's who you make your payments to. But oftentimes that servicer is actually working on behalf of somebody else, a different business that owns your mortgage. That could be the lender. Sometimes we talk about them as the investor on your loan. So oftentimes, so say I have a mortgage with Fifth Third Bank, not to pick on Fifth Third, I just used to have a mortgage with Fifth Third. They serviced my mortgage, so I made my payments to them, but they were actually doing that on behalf of Fannie Mae. Fannie Mae was the investor on my mortgage loan, but Fannie Mae doesn't have the infrastructure to do all that servicing. They just kind of hang out, and they're the money and the lender in the background. So you may have a Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac mortgage, but you may not know it since you don't actually make your payments to them. But if you go on the web, there's websites for both Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac where you can look up whether your loan is held by one of those institutions. You just put in like your address and a social security number or other information about yourself, and it will tell you if they find your mortgage loan in their database. Sometimes there's also might be an insurer on a loan, and that's often the case if it's an FHA or HUD loan, if it's a VA, Veterans Administration loan, or if it's a Rural Development USDA loan. Although I will say there's a small number of USDA loans that actually USDA collects the money on too, that they kind of work all the rules. It's a very small group. Oftentimes you kind of know that. Sometimes, especially with FHA, you'll see that the insurance payment you make each month that goes to HUD. And so that's usually the way you figure out if your mortgage is one of those. It kind of is important to know all the different players because each player has its own rules about how they evaluate what they're going to do next if you get behind on your loan. And so your options may depend on all of these different players and how they're involved in your loan. All right, so kind of knowing that the players are important, let's move on to just a very basic overview of the foreclosure process. Now, the foreclosure process in Michigan is really different than the eviction process. And the reason it's different is because Michigan is a non-judicial foreclosure state. That means there is no court case or court oversight in order for a mortgage company or mortgage servicer to foreclose. You will not be served with court documents. You will not have the opportunity to tell your situation to a judge. If you think your mortgage company is doing something wrong, it's incumbent on you to file your own court case to bring them to court. Now, whether a court case it will be filed is a state-by-state thing. So say you used to live in Illinois. In Illinois, foreclosures go through a court process. So this is something that if you live in Michigan, you need to understand that this is how Michigan does it. And if you've lived in another state or if you have friends in another state, what is happening in their state is likely not the same as what's happening in Michigan. You may need to make sure you understand what Michigan does with these. Now, knowing that there's no court case and there's no court oversight of the process, the way a foreclosure works in Michigan is actually very simple. The mortgage company, once they have done all of their obligations and they're ready to foreclose, they need to publish a notice in a newspaper in the county where the property is located for 4 weeks. They need to post a notice on the property about the foreclosure sale within the first 2 weeks. Now, that doesn't mean they need to personally serve you with the notice. They need to just put it on the property somewhere. Sometimes it's on the door, sometimes it's not. There's no real rule about where it needs to be other than on the property. They'll then have a sheriff sale, which is a public auction. Each county usually holds a public auction weekly to do their mortgage foreclosures. In Kent County, it's usually been on Wednesdays at 10 a.m. A mortgage foreclosure sale or sheriff sale can be adjourned or postponed on a week-to-week basis with no further notice to you. And some people find that happens, that they somehow, they finally get in touch with someone at the mortgage company who agrees, you know what, we'll pause this for a moment while we're looking at what we can do. But they don't cancel the sheriff sale usually. They usually postpone it week to week. but they don't have to tell you they're doing that or give you a notice of the new sale date. So if you're in a foreclosure situation, you need to be very aware of what is happening with the scheduling of that sale. And it may be that you have to be calling the attorneys doing the sale every week to find out if they're planning to sell the property that week or not. After the sale, there's what's called a redemption period. For most properties in Michigan, that's going to be 6 months. Sometimes if a property is abandoned or in need of repair, it can be shortened. Certain farm properties can get longer. During the redemption period, the folks, you can try to buy your property back, but you have to do it for the amount that was paid at the sheriff's sale. So you can't just catch up the missed payments anymore. You have to be able to afford the whole property. You can also try to sell the property to a third party, and that can usually be a good option if you have a lot of equity in the property. So you might be able to kind of earn some profit and keep that and use that to have some seed money for what you're going to do next. In any event, during the redemption period, you can continue to live in the property until the end of the redemption period. At the end of the redemption period, if you haven't repurchased it or sold it to another person, then you will be evicted from the property. And then some of the steps in Jana's earlier flow chart will become applicable in terms you'll get court paperwork and a summons and a court date. Now, unfortunately, after the sale, and especially after the redemption period, when you're in that eviction stage, it is nearly impossible to reverse a mortgage foreclosure. So again, it's critical that if a homeowner thinks that there are problems or thinks the mortgage company is doing something they shouldn't, or that they have a way to get this caught up or back on track, you need to do it before the sheriff's sale. If you wait, very likely you will not have a right to do anything afterwards. So to that end, if you are having problems with your mortgage, as many people have had during the pandemic, we recommend some resources for you. First of all, you need to know that there are reputable nonprofit housing counselors available throughout Michigan, including in Kent County. And this link here is to MSHDA, to the Michigan State Housing Development Authority. And they run or supervise a network of certified housing counselors. These are all nonprofit agencies, so they are not going to charge you any money, but they're well trained and very good at your job. So if you are behind on your mortgage, or if you've been in a long-term situation where you've been in what's called a forbearance, it's an excellent idea to, right now, reach out to your local housing counselor to see about meeting with them so that you can kind of assess where you are and assess what your options may be. Additionally, we are going to have a homeowner assistance fund opening later this year. Our best guess is sometime in the fall. But again, that same state agency, MSHDA, is receiving money through the federal government to give assistance, to give grants to homeowners to try to get them caught up in their mortgage, kind of like the rental assistance program that's already in place. We don't have all the details yet, and unfortunately, it is not yet open for applications. But it is something to be aware of as you go into the fall, if that is something that you might be available to you or if that you might need. If you think you might need some legal help, you are having trouble with your mortgage company, they are saying things that you don't think are true, they've promised you something they don't think they've delivered, they've scheduled a foreclosure and you think that they've scheduled it wrong, whatever your situation may be, you should go ahead and seek out legal assistance. The Michigan Legal Help website is available there, and the Michigan Legal Help website can get you to the correct legal aid program for your county in Michigan. If you're here in Kent County, that would be Legal Aid of Western Michigan, but different counties might be connected to different legal aid programs. So starting with Michigan Legal Help is a great way to find the right place to go. Now, just one more thing that I want our homeowners to be aware of is that there are going to be foreclosure rescue scams. Because foreclosures, unfortunately, are very public events. They get published in newspapers. This means that it's embarrassing and people may find out, but it also means that there's a whole kind of industry of people and companies out there who are able to know who is in foreclosure and contact those people with offers to help. Now, some of those offers might very well be okay and fine, but many of those offers are likely to be not always the best idea. People sometimes will come to their house offering services as real estate agents, or sometimes what are called hard money lenders. Sometimes they offer to loan you money to stop the foreclosure, but that document that you sign is actually a sales agreement where you're selling your house to them, and they sometimes rent it back to you, sometimes give it back to you on a land contract, but often, however you're getting it back is very expensive and doesn't guarantee you home ownership like you had previously. So our word of advice here is to be very, very cautious of people who are contacting you or coming to your house to offer to save you from this foreclosure. There's really good housing counselors and assistance in our area that is free, that will not charge you money and will not do some of these things that may end up leading to the loss of your house anyway. You always have the right to review any offer they want to make. You should always make sure that you read those documents and that you kind of read them on your own pace. You don't need to, they may make it sound like you don't have time to read it, or you have to read it in 2 minutes right then when you're in the middle of dinner, or you're allowed to sort of control that situation a little bit, read it on your own time, slow it down, and go at a pace that you're comfortable with. You also have the right to be left alone and not to talk to them at all. You don't have to answer those phone calls. You don't have to answer those doors. At a minimum, make sure that you read everything before you sign something. And if there is a difference between what you're signing and what they said you would be signing, stop. And don't believe them that what they said is right and the paper is wrong, because legally the paper usually is what the courts are going to recognize. It's always best to review a situation with a trusted professional before you sign anything. And again, there's really qualified free assistance available. If you think you have signed something that isn't okay, you felt rushed into it, you hadn't seen this presentation yet, you thought it would be okay, but now you're having second thoughts, that's all right. Go ahead and still reach out for help as soon as you feel like you might have a problem. I know that can be hard and sometimes embarrassing to admit that maybe you shouldn't have signed that thing, but people do, and it's okay. Seek help, and we'll see what we can do now, because sometimes there are ways to reverse these deals and to get things back to where they should have been. Legal aid, a different legal aid attorney, recently did a session on this very topic in our June community education session. And so if you look at the KDL website or at the legal aid Facebook, you should be able to see that YouTube link for that other session.
All right, thank you, Karen. That about covers us, folks, for the two topics we wanted to hit on tonight. We know it's a lot of information, and we know that if you're already coming in here worried about an eviction or a foreclosure, it's a lot of stress. But like I said, what we really hope you walk away with tonight is the notion that there is still help available for you. There's a lot out there, and it's worth the energy to go out and just explore your options. We can't guarantee outcomes, but there is help available just to talk things out and figure out what your options are. Diane, like I said, we're good here for providing the information we wanted to provide. We're happy to see if there's any questions that have come in.
Steve, we have not had any questions yet this evening, but I'm sure something will come up soon.
No worries at all. This is complicated stuff. I probably have questions, I'm sure, but I'll deal with those on my own. Okay, that is fine then for us, Diane. Everybody who's listened, thank you again for taking the time to join us. We hope this was helpful, and we are wishing you the very, very best, especially if you're stressed out about this stuff. We know it's a stressful time.
Thank you so much, Steve and Karen and Jana. This has been really informative. I've learned a lot about it, and we just thank you for sharing your expertise and willingness to help to all of our residents in our community in West Michigan. So thanks very much, and hopefully we will see you. I believe we are taking the month of August off from learning about legal issues, but we will see you in the fall. So thanks so much, and everyone at home, we'll see you soon.